poor girl becomes a doctor and is fired for saving a homeless man's life. But they had no idea who he really was. Emily Carter was born in one of the poorest neighborhoods in Detroit, the daughter of an unemployed factory worker and a mother who took on odd cleaning jobs. Emily grew up in a small house where the sound of children's laughter was often drowned out by arguments over overdue bills. From an early age, she understood that life would be a constant struggle. Before continuing, make sure to subscribe to the channel so we can reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Despite the hardships, Emily showed an insatiable curiosity. While other children played in the streets, she spent hours at the public library, engrossed in books about the human body. It was during a school trip to a community hospital that she decided her future. Watching doctors rush through the corridors, saving lives, stirred a warmth in her chest that she had never felt before. She wanted to be there wearing a white coat, making a difference. But reality was harsh. The school she attended was neglected, with unmotivated teachers and scarce resources. Yet Emily stood out as a dedicated student. She completed her homework by candlelight when the electricity was cut and studied on buses while fetching water from a communal well. Her determination did not go unnoticed. One night, on her way back from the library, Emily saw an elderly man sitting on the curb, shivering in the cold. Without hesitation, she took off her worn coat and offered it to him. He thanked her with tears in his eyes. "You're an angel," he murmured. That act of kindness left a profound mark on Emily. Even with so little, she realized she could still help someone. As the years went by, she faced looks of pity and disbelief. Poor girls don't become doctors, some said. You should think of something more realistic. But Emily refused to listen. For her, every word of doubt was fuel for her dreams. One chilly autumn afternoon, when Emily was just 12, something unexpected happened. She was at the local market, helping her mother carry groceries, when she noticed an elderly man sitting near the exit. His appearance spoke of someone who had lost everything: tattered clothes, calloused hands, and a distant gaze that seemed to carry the weight of the world. He held a small, handwritten sign that read, "Hungry. Any help is appreciated." While her mother counted coins to pay for their groceries, Emily watched the man. There was something in his eyes that struck her deeply. Ignoring the biting cold on her hands, she approached him and handed over the only item she had bought for herself: a chocolate bar. "It's not much, but maybe it'll help," she said with a hesitant smile. The man looked up, surprised. "Why would you do this for me, little one?" he asked, his voice hoarse and weak. "Because if I were in your place, I'd want someone to help me," Emily replied. He held the bar delicately, as if it were a priceless gift. "You're a good girl. Don't ever let the world take that away from you." That brief exchange stayed with her. When she got home, she couldn't stop thinking about the man. Who was he? What had brought him to that point? For Emily, life was already full of challenges. But what she saw that afternoon made her realize that there was always someone with even less. The next day at school, Emily shared her experience with her teacher, who praised her and suggested that she write about it for a local essay contest. Initially hesitant, Emily eventually participated and, to her surprise, won first place. More than the award, the experience reinforced an important lesson. Small actions can create a greater impact than we imagine. That act of kindness became a symbol for Emily. Every time she felt discouraged, she remembered the man's words and how much he had valued something so simple. It was then that she made a promise to herself. She would dedicate her life to caring for the people forgotten by the world, those whom no one else seemed to see. The following years brought even greater challenges for Emily. As she grew older, the harsh reality of her family's financial struggles became more evident. Her father, who had already been battling unemployment, began to suffer from health problems that made any attempt to return to work impossible. The burden fell on her mother, who juggled 2 jobs and came home exhausted every night. Now a teenager, Emily took on responsibilities far beyond her years. She cooked, cleaned, and helped her younger siblings with their homework. Despite her many obligations, her dedication to her studies never wavered. She knew education was her only way out of that reality, and, more importantly, the key to changing her family's life. At school, Emily continued to excel. Her grades were impeccable, and her teachers often praised her intelligence and determination. Yet she faced prejudice. Some classmates made cruel comments about her simple clothes or the fact that she never joined school trips because she couldn't afford them. Emily, however, never responded to the taunts. They don't understand, she thought. During her senior year of high school, her hard work began to gain more tangible recognition. One of her teachers, Mr. Thompson, noticed her potential and secretly entered her into a statewide science competition. When she was announced as a finalist, she was stunned. Her project, a low-cost water purification solution, was inspired by her own struggles with the lack of clean water at home. On the day of the competition, Emily was nervous but focused. She presented her project with the passion of someone who deeply understood the problem and believed in the solution. To her surprise and joy, she won. Along with the trophy, she received a full scholarship to attend the prestigious Johns Hopkins University to study medicine, something that had once seemed impossible. The path to college was now open, but Emily knew her journey would be filled with challenges. Her family couldn't provide financial support, and she would need to balance demanding studies with part-time jobs to sustain herself. Even so, in that moment, as she held her scholarship certificate, she felt for the first time that she was closer to achieving her dream. When Emily arrived at Johns Hopkins University, it felt like she was living a dream, one that had often seemed impossible. The grandeur of the campus, the state-of-the-art facilities, and the diversity of her peers were worlds apart from the life she had known. However, she quickly realized that life here would be just as challenging as it had been in Detroit, albeit in a different way. The academic pressure was intense. Professors demanded excellence, and the students, many of whom came from wealthy and influential families, competed fiercely for recognition. Emily felt like a fish out of water. She didn't have the financial means to buy brand new textbooks or hire tutors like some of her peers, but she refused to be discouraged. She spent hours in the library, taking meticulous notes by hand and reviewing all available materials. Despite her determination, Emily encountered condescending looks and subtle remarks about her humble origins. One day, during a group discussion on a clinical case, a classmate named Ryan made a cutting comment. "It's impressive that someone from where you come from can grasp such advanced concepts." The room fell silent, but Emily took a deep breath and replied firmly, "Understanding advanced concepts doesn't depend on where you come from, but on how much dedication you put in." That incident only fueled her determination to prove she belonged. While others spent their breaks socializing, Emily used that time in labs or reviewing her studies. Her dedication caught the attention of one of her professors, Dr. Margaret Collins, a renowned cardiac surgeon who became a mentor to Emily. "You have something special, Emily," Dr. Collins said one day. "Your passion will take you farther than any privilege ever could." Even with her professor's support, Emily's journey was a lonely one. To cover expenses not included in her scholarship, she worked as a waitress at a cafe near campus. Many nights, she returned to her small dorm room exhausted, but the thought of giving up never crossed her mind. She often thought of her family, especially her mother's hopeful eyes and her words of encouragement. "Live your dream for all of us." By the end of her first year, Emily ranked among the top students in her class. But the journey had changed her. The shy girl from Detroit had become a determined woman, ready to face not only academic challenges, but also the prejudices that surrounded her. She knew that every accomplishment brought her one step closer to becoming the doctor she had always dreamed of being. After years of relentless effort, Emily finally reached a pivotal moment. Her internship at one of New York's most prestigious hospitals, the St. James Medical Center. Being there was proof that all her hard work had paid off, but she knew the challenges ahead would be greater than ever. The hospital environment was high-stakes and fast-paced. Emergencies arrived without warning, surgeries were performed at a frantic pace, and interns were constantly tested on their skills and knowledge. Despite being new, Emily stood out for her calm demeanor and precision under pressure. She was always the first to offer help, often taking on tasks others avoided, and her dedication didn't go unnoticed. One night, as Emily reviewed patient charts in a quiet room, one of the senior residents, Dr. Alan Brooks, approached her. "Carter, you're efficient, but being a doctor isn't just about technique. It's about connecting with patients," he said. Initially puzzled, Emily began to reflect on his words. A few weeks later, Emily was called to assist in her first emergency surgery. The case was complex. A young man had been in a car accident, suffering multiple fractures and internal bleeding. While others hesitated, Emily remained focused and performed her tasks with impeccable precision. By the end of the surgery, the patient was stable, and the team leader, Dr. Morgan Fields, praised her performance. "You've got instinct, Carter. That can't be taught," he said, a rare compliment from such a demanding physician. Despite moments of recognition like these, the internship was filled with emotional challenges. Emily encountered cases that left a deep impact on her, such as a child diagnosed with a terminal illness or an elderly woman who passed away alone, with no family by her side. Each story seemed to touch a raw nerve within her, but it also strengthened her resolve to do everything she could for her patients. As Emily navigated these highs and lows, her work ethic earned her admiration, but also envy. Some colleagues whispered that she was overly zealous, while others accused her of trying to impress the higher-ups. She heard the comments but never responded. For Emily, her mission was far more important than the criticism. By the end of her internship, Emily was recommended to continue at the hospital as a resident, a coveted opportunity reserved only for the best. While she had climbed another rung in her career, she felt her journey was just beginning. It was a cold winter night, and Emily was finishing a grueling 16-hour shift at St. James Medical Center. The streets of New York were blanketed in a thin layer of snow, and the city seemed quieter than usual. Exhausted, Emily walked toward the hospital exit when she noticed a figure collapsed on the sidewalk near the entrance. The man was curled up, wearing tattered clothes that offered no protection against the biting cold. Emily hesitated for a moment. Technically, it wasn't her responsibility to help someone outside the hospital, especially without any information or proper authorization. But her sense of urgency overruled her doubt. Kneeling beside the man, she saw that he was unconscious, his breathing shallow. His face was pale, and his hands, stiff from the cold, trembled slightly. Without a second thought, she called for help. Once inside, the man was placed in a triage room. However, the on-duty staff seemed reluctant to address his case. "He's probably just another homeless guy," a nurse muttered indifferently. The coldness of those words outraged Emily. "He's a human being, and that's all that matters right now," she said firmly, taking charge of stabilizing the patient. During the examination, Emily discovered that the man was in critical condition, suffering from severe pneumonia and signs of advanced hypothermia. He needed immediate care, but the supervising nurse hesitated, insisting that they couldn't proceed with extensive treatment without knowing his identity or his ability to pay. Ignoring the objections, Emily made a bold and risky decision. She initiated the emergency protocol and, with the help of a trusted nurse, began the initial steps of intensive treatment. She knew the consequences could be severe, but in that moment, the only thing on her mind was saving a life. Hours later, the man began showing signs of improvement. Still unconscious but breathing on his own, he was moved to an observation room. Exhausted but relieved, Emily stepped out to grab a coffee. While waiting in line, a colleague approached her. "You know this could cost you, right? They'll find out you disobeyed direct orders," the colleague said, her tone a mix of concern and disbelief. Emily replied with only a tired smile. "I know, but he's still alive. The next morning, the hospital buzzed with whispers about what had happened. News that Emily had defied orders to save an unidentified man had spread quickly through the halls of St. James. The reactions ranged from silent admiration to outright disapproval. Some saw her actions as a testament to her true calling as a doctor, while others deemed her decision reckless and a potential threat to her career. Emily, however, had no regrets. When she visited the man in the ward, she found him awake, though still weak. His eyes, hollow and marked by years of hardship, met hers with an expression of disbelief. I didn't think I'd wake up again," he said in a raspy voice. Emily sat beside him and offered a faint smile. "You were in critical condition. It was close, but you're going to be okay now." The man tried to sit up but was overcome by a violent cough. Emily calmly adjusted his pillows and urged him to rest. "What's your name?" she asked, hoping to establish some connection. He hesitated before replying. James Anderson." She noticed the reluctance in his tone but chose not to press further. "Do you have anyone we can contact? Family? Friends?" He slowly shook his head. "No one." The brief conversation left her unsettled. It was clear that James carried more than just physical ailments. His soul seemed burdened by a story yet untold. Before leaving, Emily promised she would return to check on him later. However, things began to take a turn. By early afternoon, Emily was summoned to a meeting with the hospital's administration. Upon entering the room, she found 3 senior doctors and the on-call supervisor from the previous night, all with serious expressions. "Dr. Carter," one of them began, adjusting his glasses, "is it true that you ignored orders and performed procedures on a patient without identification or any guarantee of payment?" Emily took a deep breath, maintaining her composure. "Yes, it's true. He was in critical condition and required immediate care. There wasn't time to debate administrative policies." The room fell silent for a moment before another doctor interjected. "Do you understand that your decision put the hospital at risk, and that this could result in disciplinary actions against you?" Even under pressure, Emily stood firm. "If saving a life is considered a violation of protocol, then I'll accept the consequences. But I won't apologize for doing what was right." The days that followed were difficult for her. The hospital administration had launched a disciplinary review of her actions, and she was temporarily suspended. While awaiting the final decision, Emily felt the weight of uncertainty. Sitting in her small apartment, she gazed out the window at New York's frenetic pace, trying to find solace in the thought that, no matter the outcome, she had done what she believed was right. During this time, Emily continued visiting James. He was recovering slowly but remained guarded. On one of her visits, as she adjusted his foredrip, she commented casually, "You're a lucky man, James. You might not be here right now." He looked at her for a moment, as if wrestling with something important. "Lucky? It's strange to hear that. It's been a long time since I felt lucky." From that point, James began to open up, sharing fragments of his story. He was originally from Boston, where he had a promising career in finance. However, a series of poor decisions and the loss of his family in a car accident led to his collapse. He abandoned everything and wandered the streets, consumed by grief and guilt. "I reached a point where I didn't think my life was worth anything anymore. Then you showed up," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. James's words deeply moved Emily. She knew her decision to save him was about more than following or breaking protocols. It was about recognizing the humanity in every person, regardless of their circumstances. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, the discussions surrounding Emily's case were gaining momentum. Some staff supported her, arguing that the focus should be on patient care and compassion. Others maintained that the hospital needed to enforce strict policies to avoid setting dangerous precedents. The tension grew, and soon the situation caught the attention of the media. A local journalist, hearing about Emily's suspension, reached out to her for an interview. At first, she declined, fearing it might worsen her position. But after much reflection, she decided to speak, not to defend herself, but to highlight what truly mattered: the dignity of every human life. In the interview, Emily was candid. She shared her story, from her childhood in Detroit to the moment she chose to break hospital rules. "I grew up watching people being ignored, treated as if they didn't exist. I refused to be someone who turns their back on them." Her words struck a chord with the public, and the story quickly gained traction on social media. While it sparked debate, it also generated significant support for Emily and her stance. The aftermath of Emily's interview quickly reached proportions she hadn't anticipated. Messages of support poured in from across the country. Patients she had cared for at St. James sent letters and testimonials praising her dedication and compassion. Some recalled how she stayed hours past her shifts to ensure everyone received the attention they needed. However, criticism came as well. More conservative voices argued that her actions were irresponsible and jeopardized the financial stability of medical institutions. Within the hospital, the atmosphere was tense. The administration called for a new meeting to discuss her case, now under the spotlight of public scrutiny. Emily knew her career was on the line, but she refused to succumb to fear. Before entering the conference room, she took one last look at the bustling hallway, where nurses and doctors hurried by. "These people are here to save lives," she thought, "not to debate policies." During the meeting, Emily was once again questioned about her decision. "Do you understand the financial impact a single misstep can have on an institution like ours?" the financial director asked sternly. Remaining composed, Emily replied, "I understand, but I believe the human impact of failing to act would have been far greater. This isn't about numbers, it's about lives." As the debate continued, a hospital attorney proposed a middle ground solution. Emily could keep her job but receive a formal reprimand on her record. Before she could respond, the on-call supervisor spoke out against the idea, arguing that Emily's actions had undermined the chain of command and tarnished the hospital's reputation. Emily listened in silence, her thoughts focused on what truly mattered. When she finally had the chance to speak, her voice was steady and firm. "I don't expect everyone to understand my decision, but I could never forgive myself if that man had died because I chose to follow a protocol instead of honoring my oath as a doctor." The meeting ended without a definitive resolution, but the tension was palpable. Emily left the room knowing her future at St. James was hanging by a thread. Meanwhile, James continued to recover. He had been following the media coverage of Emily's case on television and felt something he hadn't experienced in years: genuine gratitude. He knew he owed his life to Emily and began wondering how he could repay her. During a conversation with one of the nurses, he learned that she was facing a potential end to her career. For the first time in years, James felt motivated to take action. As tension within the hospital mounted, James Anderson started gathering information about Emily. His gratitude wasn't just for the life she had saved. He felt compelled to do something meaningful. In a conversation with another patient, he learned about Emily's humble beginnings and the immense struggles she had overcome to get where she was. James realized he couldn't simply stand by while the woman who had saved his life faced retaliation. In secret, James used a computer at the local library to research more about the hospital and its administrative structure. He discovered that one of St. James Medical Center's primary sponsors was a company called Langston Group, well known for philanthropic investments in healthcare. Something about this information felt familiar, but he couldn't quite piece it together yet. Meanwhile, Emily's situation was becoming untenable. The administration had scheduled a final hearing to decide whether she would be terminated. In the days leading up to the meeting, Emily continued visiting James, but he could see that her spirit was heavy. "You did what you believed was right. Don't let them take that away from you," he said, trying to encourage her. Emily smiled, but there was a weariness in her eyes she couldn't hide. On the morning of the hearing, something unexpected happened. Now stronger, James decided to go to the hospital in person. Dressed in simple clothes donated to him, He walked to the reception desk and asked to speak with the administration. The security guard hesitated, eyeing him skeptically, but James, with an unusually firm stance, insisted. "Tell them James Anderson is here. They'll want to hear what I have to say." Inside the conference room, Emily's hearing was already underway. The arguments were the same as always: protocol, finances, reputation. Emily listened in silence, waiting for her turn to speak. Suddenly, the door opened and James walked in. Everyone in the room turned toward him. Some looked confused. Others seemed irritated by the interruption. "Who are you?" the hospital director asked, visibly annoyed. James stepped forward, carrying himself with a dignity that far surpassed his modest attire. "My name is James Anderson. I'm the man Dr. Carter saved, and I believe you need to hear what I have to say." The room fell silent. Emily, stunned, looked at James, unsure of what to expect. He continued, "I know I don't look important to you, but the truth is, I was someone before I lost everything. And it was this doctor's compassion that gave me a second chance." She didn't see a homeless man. She saw a human being. The board members exchanged uneasy glances, but James wasn't finished. "What you may not know," he said, "is that I am James Langston Anderson, and the Langston Group, which funds this hospital, is owned by my family." The revelation of James Langston Anderson landed like a bombshell in the conference room. For a few moments, there was complete silence as everyone processed the implications of what he had just said. The hospital director, visibly flustered, tried to regain his composure. "You're saying you're the heir to the Langston Group?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. James nodded, his expression serious. "Exactly. And before you ask, yes, I stepped away from everything a few years ago. I've suffered losses you can't even imagine and ended up living on the streets. But that doesn't make me any less human. What this doctor did for me wasn't just saving my life. It was restoring my dignity. Something, frankly, that many of you here seem to have forgotten." Emily stared at James, astonished. She had sensed there was something special about him, but she had never imagined his past was so significant. The impact of his words was undeniable. Some members of the board looked uneasy, while others glanced at Emily with a mixture of respect and regret. James continued, "My family has invested in this hospital because we believe in its mission to save lives. But today, I see that mission being compromised by rules that prioritize bureaucracy over humanity. If this board can't value someone like Dr. Carter, perhaps it's time we reconsider our support." The director attempted to intervene, visibly uncomfortable. "Mr. Langston Anderson, please understand that our policies exist to ensure the hospital's sustainability, and ignoring patients on the brink of death ensures what exactly?" James interrupted, his tone unwavering. He turned to Emily, now addressing her directly. "You did what was right regardless of the cost to yourself. That's courage. And that's exactly what a doctor should be." The tension in the room was almost palpable. The director, realizing that James's support for the hospital was at stake, tried to de-escalate the situation. "Perhaps we were too quick in our assessment. Dr. Carter clearly has an admirable commitment to her patients. We can reevaluate her case." Emily, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. "I don't need reconsiderations made out of convenience. I want to know if this hospital is willing to put its patients above everything else, as it should. I don't do this for recognition. I do it because I believe every life matters." The courage and conviction in her words, combined with the weight of James's presence, shifted the mood in the room. The director announced that Emily's suspension would be lifted and that she could return to work immediately. Upon hearing the decision, James turned to Emily with a faint smile, and she responded with a look of gratitude. However, she knew this was not merely a personal victory. It was a step toward something greater, challenging a system that too often failed to see what truly mattered. After the hearing, Emily left the room feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. Though she had kept her job, she understood that the battle she had faced was a reflection of something much larger. Her conviction that the healthcare system needed to become more humane was now stronger than ever. James was waiting for her outside, leaning casually against one of the hallway columns. When she approached, he smiled with an easy confidence, as if all the earlier tension had evaporated. "You were incredible in there," he said. Emily chuckled softly, still trying to process everything that had happened. "I think it was you who changed everything, James. Without you, I'd probably be packing up my things right now." He shook his head. "Don't fool yourself. You didn't need me to prove who you are. You had already done that long before I showed up. I just gave you a little nudge." The two walked out of the hospital together, and for the first time, Emily allowed herself to ask more personal questions. "So, what are you going to do now, James? Go back to your old life?" He paused, thoughtful. "I'm not sure. I've realized that running from my problems didn't bring me peace, but I also don't know if I can go back to being the person I used to be. Maybe I need to find some middle ground." In the days that followed, the story of Emily and James continued to gain media attention. Under the public eye, the hospital began implementing changes to its protocols, including greater flexibility in handling emergency cases without the bureaucratic barriers that had nearly cost James his life. Emily was invited to participate in internal meetings as a representative of the younger doctors, something she had never anticipated. James, meanwhile, began attending support groups to confront the trauma and guilt that had led him to the streets. Inspired by Emily's example, he decided to use his experiences to help others in similar situations. "I don't want anyone to go through what I did," he said during one of these sessions, where his story began inspiring others. The bond between the two also grew stronger. While there was nothing explicit between them beyond friendship and mutual respect, James and Emily found in each other a source of support that helped them move forward. He encouraged her to keep fighting for changes in the healthcare system, while she urged him to believe he could still make a difference in the world. By this point, Emily realized that saving James had been more than just an act of kindness. It was the beginning of something far greater than she could have ever imagined. Over the months, Emily became a central figure in discussions about healthcare reform both within and beyond the hospital. Her practical ideas and natural empathy earned her widespread support, though she also faced resistance from more traditional figures. Between administrative meetings, long shifts, and conversations with patients, Emily dedicated herself to improving the balance between regulations and humanity. James, now rebuilt, made a bold decision. He chose to reclaim his position at the Langston Group, not as the isolated heir he once was, but as someone transformed by his experiences. "It's time to use the resources I have for something bigger," he told Emily during one of his visits to the hospital. Inspired by her impact, James began redirecting the company's investments toward projects addressing structural issues in healthcare, such as clinics for underserved populations. One of these clinics was to be built in the neighborhood where Emily had grown up in Detroit. When he told her about the project, she was stunned. "You're going to do this where I grew up?" she asked, almost unable to believe it. James smiled. "If anyone can tell me where to start making a difference, that person is you." Emily accepted the invitation to collaborate on the project, dividing her time between New York and Detroit. Initially, it was challenging to adjust her already exhausting routine, but the idea of giving back to her community kept her motivated. On a trip to Detroit to oversee the clinic's progress, Emily reconnected with people from her past, teachers who had encouraged her, neighbors who had rooted for her, and even children who reminded her of herself. The clinic's development progressed, and Emily helped assemble a dedicated team of young doctors, nurses, and social workers committed to transforming lives. During a preliminary opening event for the community, Emily delivered a heartfelt speech. "This place is not just a healthcare center. It's proof that everyone deserves care, dignity, and the chance to start over." The project's impact was immediate. Families who had previously lacked access to medical care began receiving basic treatments and preventive guidance. Homeless individuals were welcomed and connected to rehabilitation programs. Emily felt a sense of fulfillment like never before. Watching the clinic's success, James felt a surge of energy. "This is just the beginning, Emily. We can take this to other cities." She agreed but reminded him of something important. "Yes, we can. But we must never forget to keep this human. No bureaucracies that put up barriers for those who need it most." With the success of the Detroit clinic, Emily and James began receiving invitations to speak about their innovative model. They presented at universities, community events, and even international forums. Emily, who had never considered herself a strong public speaker, learned to transform her experiences into powerful messages. Meanwhile, James, with his natural business acumen, showcased the financial benefits of a more accessible and humane system. Despite the project's exponential growth, Emily remained grounded in her hands-on work. One afternoon, while seeing patients at the Detroit clinic, she was visited by a woman with 2 young children. They looked visibly tired and undernourished. Upon asking about her story, Emily discovered that the woman had fled an abusive domestic situation and was living in a shelter. Emily's empathy was immediate. After ensuring the children received medical care and food, she sat with the mother to discuss options. This encounter made Emily realize that physical health was only one part of the challenges faced by many vulnerable families. "We need partnerships with other social services," she told James that evening. "Health is just one piece of the puzzle. If we want to transform lives, we have to think bigger." Inspired by the experience, Emily and James began expanding the clinic model to include psychological, legal, and educational support. Each clinic became a comprehensive support hub for the community, helping people rebuild their lives. This next step garnered even more attention, both from supporters who admired their vision and critics who questioned the feasibility of sustaining something so ambitious. Amid the challenges, moments of deep emotion also emerged. During the opening of a new clinic in Chicago, a young man approached Emily. He was dressed simply, but his smile was radiant. "You might not remember me, but I remember you. I was one of the kids you used to tutor in Detroit. You always told me I could be whatever I wanted to be. Now, I'm a nursing student." His words brought tears to Emily's eyes. In that moment, she realized that the seeds she had planted years ago were beginning to blossom in ways she had never imagined. James, watching closely, said with a mix of pride and admiration, "You know you're changing the world, right?" Emily smiled humbly. "I'm not changing anything alone. We're all doing this together." As the project's expansion gained momentum, Emily began to feel the weight of her accumulated responsibilities. Between treating patients, overseeing clinics, and attending conferences, she barely had time for herself. James noticed her exhaustion and suggested she take a break, but she resisted. "There are so many people who still need help. I can't stop now," she replied with a tired smile. Despite her determination, Emily's body started showing signs of strain. During a meeting to plan the opening of yet another clinic, she suddenly felt dizzy and had to sit down. James immediately halted the meeting and insisted she get checked out. After much reluctance, Emily agreed and went for a consultation, where she was diagnosed with physical and mental exhaustion. The diagnosis forced Emily to reassess her priorities. Speaking with James on a quiet evening, she reflected on her journey. "I always thought I had to carry everything on my own, that if I didn't give it my all, things would fall apart. But now I realize that's not true. We've built something that goes beyond me, and it's okay to trust others to carry it forward." Emily decided to reduce her workload and focus more on training new leaders within the clinics, ensuring the legacy she and James had built could continue without her constant presence. This decision brought an unexpected sense of relief and allowed her to appreciate the fruits of her labor in a more meaningful way. Meanwhile, James was also experiencing personal changes. Inspired by Emily's strength and dedication, he began rebuilding lost relationships with friends and family. His journey, once marked by pain, was now guided by a renewed sense of purpose. In a heartfelt conversation with Emily, he thanked her for showing him that even the deepest scars could heal with time and the right care. One of the most emotional milestones came during the opening of a clinic in New Orleans. Emily received an unexpected honor, a commemorative plaque celebrating her impact on community health. Beside her, James was recognized for his commitment to funding and supporting the project, but he made sure to shift the spotlight to Emily. All of this started with her, he said, with a doctor who didn't see rules, but saw lives that needed saving. Emily, deeply moved, took the opportunity to remind everyone that the work they were celebrating was the result of many hands. None of us does this alone. Every life touched here is the product of collective effort. And that is something we must always remember. Time passed, and the clinics that Emily and James had helped establish evolved into a national network of integrated healthcare centers. Each location became a symbol of hope, not only for the communities they served, but also for the healthcare professionals who found renewed purpose in their work. Emily, now a nationally recognized figure, was invited to Washington to receive an honorary award in recognition of her contributions to healthcare access and her transformation of a system that often felt cold and out of reach. Standing on stage in a packed auditorium to warm applause, her speech remained true to her principles of collaboration and empathy. "This award isn't mine," she began. "It belongs to every doctor, nurse, social worker, and volunteer who believed we could do better. It belongs to the communities that came together to care for one another. It belongs to every person who found the courage to ask for help and to those who responded with compassion. The real victory isn't mine, it's ours." In the back of the auditorium, James watched with a quiet smile. He knew that, despite all the recognition, Emily remained the humble and dedicated woman he had first met on that cold night in New York. After the event, as they spoke in a quiet corner of the reception hall, he asked, "Do you realize how much you've changed the world, Emily?" She laughed softly. "Maybe the world has changed a little, but what really matters is that some lives were touched. That's enough for me." Inspired by her words, James made a life-changing decision on the spot. During a press conference the following morning, he announced that he would officially step down as the leader of the Langston Group to devote himself fully to community work. His goal was to build even more bridges between those in need and the resources available. The announcement caused a stir, but James was at peace. He knew he was on the right path, especially with Emily by his side. In the years that followed, their efforts continued to expand, reaching communities in other countries and inspiring similar initiatives around the world. Emily, now recognized as one of the most influential doctors of her generation, never lost the essence of what drove her. Whenever possible, she returned to the Detroit clinic where it all began to personally care for patients. One day, while finishing a shift at the clinic, a young girl approached her. She held an old notebook filled with notes and scribbles, and she said shyly, "I want to be a doctor like you." Emily smiled, seeing in the girl's eyes the same determination she had once carried. "Then never let anyone tell you that you can't. If I could do it, so can you." And so the cycle continued. Emily's story wasn't just one of overcoming adversity. It was about the power of believing in people, even when the world forgets them. Her legacy was more than clinics and awards. It was living proof that a single act of kindness, no matter how small it may seem, can change lives in ways no one could ever imagine. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like and a comment. Let me know which city you're watching this video from. A big hug, and see you in the next story.